Let's speak to Steve Smith on this very point now. He is the CEO of Care4Calais. Steve, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Just shine some light onto this one if you can. You will be aware that the big headline that has run away all morning has been the severe fear of water. I mean, that is a line, I think, that surprised many of us, given that this is a fairly, stationary, sturdy barge. Essentially, it's a sort of a floating hotel, but you don't sense you're floating on it. I mean, is that a real thing, this severe fear of water?
I think concentrating on the severe fear of water and treating it glibly like that trivialises the argument. I mean, as a charity that supports refugees, we are concerned about the use of that barge as a whole. So we were originally concerned about the fact that it was built for 220 people, and there's an intention to put 506 on board. You can say all you like about, well, there are gymnasiums and quiet rooms and so on, but actually some of those communal spaces have been taken up to put 6 beds in. So the communal spaces that were there for only 220 have now been minimised even further when trying to put more than double that number on board. We have severe concerns still about the fire safety. We've seen the aerial photographs of it. One of the long sides of the barge is alongside the quay, so that's where the fire exits will be. There are 3 stories. What happens if you're over the far side of that boat and a fire breaks out, and in the panic, in the rush, with more than twice the number of people that should be on board, untrained, probably unfire drilled, trying to make their way to the quayside through smoke-filled corridors, it's a nightmare waiting to happen. I've heard...
But that can happen in all sorts of accommodation, isn't it? Where, buildings and accommodation do their best to try and have a situation where people could escape somewhere with safety, but there's always going to be a situation where somebody might struggle. But broadly speaking, this has been given the green light as accommodation.
Well, so we're told, but I understand the Fire Brigades Union are still opposed to it in terms of safety. So it's probably a pretty limited green light. In any case, so as a whole, we're opposed to it. We believe it's going to be overcrowded. We believe it forms a very similar... it gives the impression of being a detention facility, effectively. Now, we can say, well, the asylum seekers are free to come and go. Yes, they kind of are and kind of not. So they're in a secure port. They can only go via the buses that leave on the hour every hour up until 11 o'clock at night. So they have to use the designated transport because of the security within the port. They have to go through 2 airport-style security checkpoints going out and in. We've seen how confined the spaces are, to all intents and purposes, to many of those who've previously been detained and in some aspects tortured, in some cases tortured. This resembles a detention facility.
Steve, I mean, some of these people will be here illegally, and you're worried about the bus routes?
I'm not worried about the bus routes. I'm worried about the fact that this resembles a detention.
Well, you just mentioned the bus routes. I mean, it may well be a form of detention until people are processed, but you can come and go.
You can come and go using the buses. Yes, that's true, but that's the only way you can come and go. So, given that...
Right, well, what do most people, how do most residents in an area come and go? They use public transport, unless you're suggesting we give everybody a car or something.
Well, don't be absurd. Most residents who are living in a city or a town or a village, a hotel, can walk out of the doors and walk around in the open air. What they can't do on this barge is easily do that because they're in a secure area. So
you can walk out and get some open. I mean, what are you suggesting here? I mean, to many people, they'll be scratching their heads, Steve, on this, thinking, what is this man talking about?
What I'm suggesting is this is an inappropriate way to house people who, in many cases, have been subject to detention and torture.
It's clear. Well, just on that point, and we raised this at the very beginning, I think many of us have a question over the idea that somebody has escaped a tyrannical regime, a brutal regime where torture, routine imprisonment, all manner of other horrendous acts and criminality carried out against individuals, barbarity from government and all of that. And you escape that, you flee that, you get away from that. Who wouldn't want to? And yet when you get to a safe country, i.e. the UK, you complain about the bus routes? Are you for real, Steve?
Who's complaining about the bus routes? Nobody's complaining about the bus routes.
You were just complaining about the bus routes.
No, you've completely misquoted me. What I was talking about with the buses, I was saying that the only way in and out is via a bus. So they don't have the freedom to walk around, just leave the barge. What I'm saying is that this is resembling a detention facility which could re-traumatise those who have previously been detained.
I mean, these are, as you well know, these are largely economic migrants, and I don't say that as a pejorative. I don't think they're criminals. I don't think they're here to scrounge. I get all of that.
What do you mean they're largely economic migrants? What are you basing that on?
You've never done this level of research? You've never looked into the stories? You've never been there to Calais, spoken to the people, read the stories, seen the interviews? I mean, I don't blame somebody for wanting to get here, but to arrive and then mount a legal case against your accommodation is breathtaking, Steve. And people like yourself and other lawyers are the mischief behind it, right? Your starting point is a political one, isn't it?
Absolutely not. My starting point is one of a humanitarian approach to a difficult situation and trying to offer kindness to people who are in the worst situation.
Which is what I agree. So we are offering kindness. We have 170,000 cases of places where we are accommodating people. I would agree with you 100% on the inadequacies of our own government and their lack of being able to process these people. But the fact that we accommodate people, we allow them a small amount of money. It's not great, I know that, but you've got accommodation, you've got safety, you've got warmth. That's about as civilised as it gets. And every time something happens, somebody like you and others come along and say, not good enough. What the hell do you want, a palace?
We've got 170,000 backlog. 10 years ago, civil servants, 380 civil servants, were able to process, on average, 14 claims a month. Now we've got 3 times that number. We've got 1,200 civil servants processing 4 claims on average per month. The entire system is broken.
Correct. No disagreement on that. But the idea that you're agitating over a barge.
Now, the whole barge business is a knee-jerk reaction. You're talking at most of putting 506 people on board. As I said before, that's double the number that was intended for. But in any case, we know there are at least 50,000 in hotels around the country locked into the asylum system. This is a drop in the ocean. So, amongst other things, this is really a propaganda stunt. And
listen, I don't dispute that. This is the government saying, look, we're doing something a bit different. But that doesn't in any way negate the point that this is still safe accommodation. It's clean, it's tidy, you have a bed, you have a little desk, you have a shower, you have facilities, you can be fed. It's not the Four Seasons, I know that. But nonetheless, it's a civilised response to a problem, right? There's a lot of places around the world where you wouldn't get anything like that. And frankly, Steve, if you or I had escaped this tyrannical regime of torture and goodness knows what, then I'd be happy to sleep up a tree, frankly, wouldn't you?
It's an interesting point, but it's intended as a deterrent effect. It's not intended to be some sort of long-stay accommodation.
Well, a government does have multiple responsibilities. A deterrent effect is that's not a bad thing for a government. They're meant to have a deterrent effect, surely.
So who's it a deterrent effect for?
People who shouldn't be here.
Is it a deterrent effect for the Afghan full colonel who served alongside British forces in Afghanistan and has now got a letter to evict him, to deport him to Rwanda?
You'll get no argument from me on that. I agree with you. And if somebody is coming along and their small child and they've escaped Syria and their child and the mother are traumatised, then like we have done in previous years over many, many issues and stories, we should open our door and help those people. But you know as well as I do, Steve, stand on the port of Dover and see 40 fighting fit 23-year-olds come in off the boat. That isn't the story we're seeing, right?
Well, 75% of the claims that are put in for asylum to become a recognised refugee are accepted.
I don't dispute the inadequacies in that part of the system either.
And that's across the board. So 75% that are coming in are deemed to be true asylum seekers, not economic migrants.
Well, isn't that because organisations like yourself advance the case and the causes and build the arguments for these people? Listen, Steve, I have to stop there for no other reason than time. We could speak a lot longer, and I'm sure we will do again, or maybe you'll never come on again, I don't know. Steve Smith is the CEO of Care4Calais.